The tiny trunk of the baby elephant lifted into the air, letting out a sharp cry that cut through the muffled silence of the jungle. The little one was trapped, wrapped in the relentless coils of a giant snake. The dark scales glistened in the light filtering through the canopy, each contraction dangerously close to crushing still fragile bones. The ground shook before the sound arrived. It was a deep rumble, filled with fury. The mother was coming. She emerged from between the trees like an ancient force, pushing down trunks, tearing through branches, her gaze fixed on the calf. There was no hesitation, only the pure wild instinct to save her young. The giant snake raised its head, cold black eyes locked on the massive figure advancing. The forked tongue tasted the air as if measuring the size of the threat. But at that moment, the mother elephant was not just a threat. She was a wall of flesh, tusks, and muscle, ready to crush anything in her path. The confrontation exploded without warning. Her trunk delivered a sharp blow to the snake's body, which writhed, tightening even more around the calf. The little one let out another cry, weaker this time. Every second was a race against time, and the entire jungle seemed to hold its breath. But to understand how that peaceful morning turned into a nightmare, we have to go back a few minutes earlier. The sun filtered through the tall canopy, painting the jungle floor with patches of gold and shadow. A small group of elephants moved slowly through a clearing, guided by the steady steps of the matriarch. Among them, the youngest, still with wrinkled skin and oversized ears, explored every corner with the curiosity of one who has yet to know danger. The mother kept him always in sight, but allowed him small adventures a few meters away. She knew this was how he would learn to use his trunk, to recognize scents and sounds, to be an elephant. The air was warm and humid, filled with the hum of insects and the distant calls of unseen birds. Then something broke the usual stillness of the morning. A small bird, its feathers shimmering blue and green, swooped down and landed a few meters from the calf. He lifted his trunk, curious, letting out a soft, low sound. The bird hopped, tilting its head as if inviting him to come closer, before taking off again and landing a little farther ahead. Step by step, the little one left the group behind, following that flash of color that seemed to know exactly where it was leading him. He approached a narrow path where the vegetation thinned and the ground was firmer and warmer. There, the sound of the forest seemed to change. There was a strange stillness, as if the very air was waiting. In a shadowed corner, motionless as stone, a pair of black eyes watched every movement. The baby elephant took another step, and in that instant the silence broke. With a movement as fast as the crack of a whip, something thick and dark shot out from the vegetation and wrapped around his front legs. Before he could react, another loop tightened around his body. It was a giant snake, muscles pulsing beneath scaly skin, each contraction stealing more of his breath. The little one let out a high, desperate squeal that echoed through the jungle. The snake's strength was like a living noose, tightening with deadly precision. The dry leaves on the ground crackled under the weight of the undulating body as the trapped calf thrashed in panic. Far away, the mother elephant lifted her head. Her gaze, serene until now, turned hard as stone. She raised her trunk and let out a bellow that vibrated through the air. She charged toward the sound, tearing through everything in her path: bushes, fallen trunks, broken branches. Each step seemed to make the ground tremble. The giant snake held its grip, unmoved by her approach. Its cold eyes stayed locked on the small prey, the forked tongue sliding out like a silent promise of death. The calf fought for each breath, legs trembling under the crushing pressure. The jungle, which moments before had been alive with 1,000 sounds, fell silent. Everything waited for the moment the mother would arrive. The first impact was like thunder in the jungle. The mother elephant charged at the giant snake with the force of a storm. her trunk raised and tusks ready to pierce. The ground shook under her weight as she advanced, letting out a bellow that echoed through the canopy. The giant snake did not retreat. Its scales contracted in an even crueler squeeze, as if trying to win the battle before even facing the new threat. Its black eyes remained fixed and cold, and the forked tongue flicked through the air. With a swift movement, the mother struck the coiled body of the giant snake with her trunk. The sound of the impact rang out like wood breaking, and the dark body twisted in a violent spasm. Leaves flew, branches snapped, and the fight became a chaos of strength and instinct. The calf, trapped at the center of the storm, let out a weak sound, almost drowned out by the noise. Feeling the urgency, the mother lifted a front foot and pinned part of the giant snake's body to the ground. The pressure made the soil give way slightly, but the giant snake, in a burst of resistance, coiled even tighter, trying to protect itself and keep its prey. The jungle seemed to vibrate with every passing second, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, sweat, and danger. The outcome of that fierce duel was far from certain. The sound of the confrontation carried far beyond the clearing. Several miles away, two wildlife rangers were driving along a narrow dirt road in an open jeep. The engine hummed low, blending with the steady buzz of the jungle. "Did you hear that?" asked Ethan, the younger of the two, straightening in his seat. It was a deep sound, like distant thunder, but rhythmic. "I heard it," replied Tom, a veteran with over 20 years of patrols. His gaze hardened. "That's no thunder. That's an elephant's bellow, and it's full of fury." Without hesitation, Tom turned the wheel toward the sound. The jeep's tires crunched over branches and stones as the vegetation closed in around them. With every yard they covered, the bellow grew louder, now mixed with a sharp, heavy noise, like blows against wood. When they finally broke through to an opening, the scene before them made time seem to slow. In the center, the mother elephant and the giant snake were locked in a brutal duel. The snake's dark body coiled around the calf, each contraction seeming to drain more life from it. The mother, wild with fury, fought to free him, but with every strike she landed, the snake tightened its grip. Ethan already had his hand on the door to jump out, but Tom extended his arm, stopping him. "Wait. Right now we're more of a risk than a help. A mother elephant in this situation won't see allies. She'll see threats." The two men stayed frozen for a moment, eyes fixed on the battle, knowing each passing second could mean life or death for the calf. The mother's bellow was so close now that the air seemed to vibrate. Tom looked at Ethan, and no more words were needed. "We're going to need the poles," he said, jumping out of the jeep and running to the back. He pulled out two long, sturdy poles, normally used to push through dense vegetation or check unstable ground. Today, they would be improvised weapons in a desperate fight. Ethan grabbed one and gripped it tightly, his eyes fixed on the struggle ahead. They advanced slowly, moving in a wide arc to avoid approaching the mother directly. With each step, her eyes shifted between the giant snake and the intruders, her massive body tense like a spring ready to snap. Her bellow had turned into a deep, continuous sound, heavy with warning. "I need you to distract it," murmured Tom, already calculating the distance. Ethan nodded, moving off to the side and slamming his pole against the ground, making noise and waving to draw part of the snake's attention. The serpent's head turned for an instant, and Tom seized the opening. With all his strength, he wedged the tip of the pole into the narrow space between one of the coils and the calf's fragile body. The resistance was like trying to lift a living stone, but Tom's weight made the pressure give a few centimeters. The snake reacted violently, its body twisting with a sharp crack. The tail whipped through the air, nearly hitting Ethan, who stepped back instinctively but kept up the attack, striking the dark body to confuse and disorient it. It was a dangerous game of seconds, and each one could be the last. The giant snake's body thrashed in a storm of strength and desperation. With each of Ethan's blows, its focus split between the mother elephant and the two humans moving along the edges of the fight. Tom kept up the pressure, feeling the rock-hard muscles begin, little by little, to give way. The calf let out a weak but living sound. It was enough to double their efforts. The snake coiled abruptly, trying to regain control, but the strike from the mother's trunk hit the middle of its body with enough force to make it loosen slightly. In that moment, Tom pushed with everything he had. The space between the coils widened by a few precious inches, allowing air to flow back into the calf's lungs. He took a deep breath and let out a hoarse cry that echoed through the clearing. But the victory was far from won. In a final act of resistance, the snake threw its head back, mouth open in a threatening arc. Ethan stepped back, keeping his pole in front of him, ready to react. The mother elephant took another step forward, her body tense as steel, prepared to crush the enemy if needed. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and adrenaline. No one there could predict what the next move would be. The attack came fast. The giant snake lunged toward Tom, its fangs open in a threatening arc. But before it could strike, the mother elephant surged forward with crushing force. Her trunk partially wrapped around the snake's body, and with a sudden jerk, slammed it against the ground. The impact echoed through the clearing, sending dust and dry leaves into the air. The serpent writhed, trying to regain its balance, but Ethan took advantage of the distraction to strike repeatedly at the part of its body still wrapped around the calf. With each blow, the pressure weakened. Tom, sensing the final opening, pushed with all his strength. Suddenly, the coils gave way. The little elephant stumbled to the side, free but exhausted, breathing irregularly. The mother immediately positioned herself between him and the snake, ears spread wide and body in a full defensive stance. Realizing the fight was lost, the snake began to retreat slowly. Its scales slid over the dirt, leaving a winding trail until it vanished into the dense vegetation. But even with the danger gone, the tension in the clearing did not fade at once. The calf was standing but fragile, and everyone knew the hardest part was still ahead. The silence that followed felt almost unreal after the chaos. The sound of the mother elephant's heavy breathing mixed with the calf's and the pounding hearts of the two men. Tom took a slow step forward, keeping his hands visible and away from his body. The mother turned to face him. Her eyes, once blazing with fury, now held a deep, watchful focus, wary but not blind. She stood still, as if weighing every intention. Ethan stayed farther back, ready to step in if things went wrong. Tom lowered himself until he was at the calf's eye level, keeping small and non-threatening. There was no rush in his movements, only deliberate calm. For several long seconds, nothing moved. Then the mother did something unexpected. Slowly, she stepped just far enough to leave the calf in view, without breaking her defensive line, as if granting a moment of approach. Tom understood the gesture. He took another step forward, knelt, and extended his hand toward the calf without touching, letting him sense his presence. The little one, trembling and exhausted, let out a soft, almost sigh-like sound. Tom reached into his bag, took out a small water bottle, and gently poured a few drops onto the calf's trunk. He drank, hesitant but without pulling away. The mother watched every detail, her breathing still heavy but without advancing. In that clearing, there was now something that hadn't been there minutes before, a fragile thread of trust. The calf drank a little more water and let out a low sound, as if it were a timid thank you. Tom stepped back slightly, allowing the mother to move closer again. She raised her trunk and gently touched the calf's side, as if to confirm he was there, safe. For a moment, the three of them, mother, calf, and human, remained still, united only by silence and the weight of what had just happened. Ethan approached slowly, keeping his distance, and watched the scene in silence. The mother elephant lowered her head toward Tom. It was not a gesture of submission, nor of full friendship, but something rarer, recognition. A moment in which two very different species understood each other without words. Then, without warning, she turned to her calf and began walking out of the clearing. Her steps were firm but slow, as if each one were measured to protect him. The calf followed close behind, his trunk occasionally brushing against hers. Tom and Ethan stood watching until the two silhouettes vanished into the dense vegetation. The distant sound of breaking branches faded until it was replaced only by the whisper of the jungle. In that quiet, they both knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment where instinct, courage, and compassion met. And they also knew that although the jungle rarely gave second chances, that morning it had allowed a miracle. If this story touched your heart, help us share it. Leave a like, tell us in the comments what moved you most, and subscribe for more real stories of courage and connection between humans and animals. Every view and share helps keep stories like this alive.